So hi everyone, my name is John Lovett. As Bill mentioned, I am the Vice President of Analytics and Insights at Seer Interactive. And before we start, I'll give you a little fun fact about myself. In addition to my career in analytics, my side hustle is that I'm a seaweed farmer. So I live here in Massachusetts, and I've established a seaweed farm where I grow seaweed and sell it as a food source. So that's a little fun fact about me. But let's talk Google Analytics. Let's talk about the GA4 migration. I wanted to start this presentation by talking a little bit about procrastination. So for those of you who like to procrastinate, I am an avid procrastinator. Maybe I've just learned to love it, but I'm very good at it. Procrastinating, putting things off to the last minute, getting things done at the last mile. I had a former colleague who we collaborated on a lot of projects. We did a lot of presentations together, and she would tell me when she was in grade school, she would get assigned her homework on a Friday afternoon, and the first thing she did when she got home from school was run home and do all of her homework. That way she could enter into her weekend feeling relaxed, knowing that she had everything done and that she was ready to go for the upcoming week. And I said, that's very interesting. I am different than that. I usually wait until Sunday night to do my homework. And even then, when I don't get it done, oftentimes in grade school, I was doing my homework on the bus on the way to school. So if you're like me, maybe you haven't migrated to GA4 yet from Universal Analytics, I'm here to tell you that there's a little bit more time for all you procrastinators out there. So with that, quick little agenda of what we're going to talk about today. So first thing, we'll talk about some key dates and deadlines. Then we'll get into building a measurement strategy. I know that there's a lot of talk already today about this, critically important. I'll give you how I do it and some recommendations for how you might be able to build a measurement strategy as well. In addition to that, we'll get into the migration steps and some helpful community resources. Then we'll talk about connecting Google Ads to your GA4 accounts. This is something that we at Seer Interactive do a lot of. We're very frequently kind of making these connections and going through connecting accounts. So we'll talk you through that process as well. And then finally, the fifth topic that we'll have is teaching your teammates GA4. A lot to cover on this as well, but that's what we'll go through in the next 35, 40 minutes or so. So for the key dates and deadlines, as you all know, we've got some dates looming ahead of us. For those of you that are on Universal Analytics free version, your data collection will stop on July 1st. But let me kind of walk you through this timeline. I realize there's a lot of words on this slide, but you know what the deprecation of Universal Analytics means for you today. All of us, Google had announced that auto migrations were going to begin on March 1st, 2023. I believe that all of us were waiting with bated breath to see what was going to happen. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but effectively, there haven't been migrations, auto migrations yet. So we expect that there will be, and there will likely be a couple of different tranches of migrations where initially account properties, following that conversions, potentially audiences, maybe even Google Ads linking will happen as well. But a date that you need to worry about, this one is right on us. You know, this is now. Hasn't happened yet, but it's likely to be coming. The next one that I already mentioned was the Universal Analytics standard data collection. This is UA3. Data collection stops on July 1st, 2023. So this one we do expect to occur. There's been lots of build up to this. No one should be surprised by this date. However, the November 1st date that I put in here, one of the things that's going to be very important with migrations is exporting your Universal Analytics data. We at Seer Interactive have created a deadline of November 1st for doing this. The reason we're doing that is let's get your data out for standard or free analytics. It is highly likely that by January 1st, 2024, you will have no access to your Universal Analytics accounts. For that reason, we set this deadline. Even if you're on a GA360 account, you may still want to start this export process. It's a good thing to get it out. There's a lot of different ways to do this, which I won't get into today, but happy to talk about if you've got questions. The last date that I've got on this at the top here July 1st, 2024. So a little over a year away. We've got some time, but for each of you 360 customers, if you're paying for Google Analytics today, you will have a little bit longer to migrate your data to be able to continue to access your accounts. But we do expect that minimal support, and there will be possible performance degradation because Universal Analytics will likely not be supported up until this time frame. But those are some of the deadlines that you should be aware of. So in preparation for the GA Auto-Migration, I had a number of things that I was going to talk about here. Account clutter, the fact that if you didn't use the GA4 account setup or account assistant, you were likely to have duplicate accounts in there. So this is one of the things that we're anticipating. Additionally, we're anticipating missing data. If you had your goals set up and expecting to see things like conversions and dollars in your new GA4 account, it's highly likely that that would not have translated as well with an auto-migration. And the third big thing that we are anticipating for the auto-migration is potential inadvertent collection of personally identifiable information, something that we do not want. The most common issue here would be carrying over information in a URL query string. And so basically, even if you didn't want this to happen, if you auto-migrated, there's potential to do this. So my plan for today, after March 1st, was to show you all the disasters that happened, to log into accounts. I intentionally left a few of my accounts to not toggle over the do not, to opt out of the auto migrations, just to see what was going to happen. I think all of us were expecting something like this to occur, where we're watching it with bated breath about, oh, what are these disasters going to look like? Nothing's happened yet, because to my knowledge, Google has not auto-migrated anyone yet, but we're still watching and waiting for this potentially to happen. But let's move on. So now we'll talk about building a GA4 measurement strategy. As I mentioned, there's a lot of people that talk about this and a lot of things that can happen with a measurement strategy. I'm going to touch on a few of them here. And really the way that we think about this, it's really the tip of the iceberg. You want to be able to understand kind of what's underneath the surface. And a measurement strategy for most organizations is a way to outline the understanding of your business and to share that proposed approach toward measuring, toward how you're going to be able to analyze data, to how you're going to understand your performance with marketing and other web and digital activities is through this measurement strategy. So think about this as a way to be able to say, here's the plan, let me share that with my stakeholders to make sure that they understand the plan, to be able to talk through these things, to be able to say, like, here's what we're going to do, and really kind of having that strategy is the first step to doing a migration. The goal is not just to scratch the surface, but to gain a deep understanding of who your audiences are, what their problems are, and how they are going to use the new GA4 data to be able to answer their business questions and really to look in and do analysis there. So I will mention also this last little paragraph here. Measurement strategies are almost always an iterative process. What this means is, and strategy in general is this way too. You set the strategy, you have your best intentions, but things change. You should view it as a dynamic, ongoing effort, and your strategies will change over time. So make sure that you keep that in mind. This isn't a set it and forget it objective. It is a way to be able to put out the plan, socialize that plan, get everybody on board with what you're doing, and then be able to evolve from there. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can do this. Where I like to start is, I call it know your business, get your data. And I'm going to break this out for you in kind of two different ways that we're going to talk about this. So let's start with the know your business. So there's a couple of steps here. Really what we encourage our clients to think about, and I encourage you to think about this as well, is what are your priorities? I know that this text is small, probably illegible to you, but if you're thinking about things like, we want to use this to benchmark site performance, that's a priority for us. Well, how can we get the data that's going to show the foundational tracking that shows us that page performance? Maybe your priority is something like, we want to have a solid first-party data strategy. That's your priority. You build a strategy around that. Let's make sure we get the right things in place. Or maybe you want to have a clear view. Your priority is getting a clear view of marketing attribution. and audience activation, well, ensure that you've got the tools and the information that you need to be able to understand that and to be able to look at attribution. I show you this because starting out with those business priorities is a key way to be able to get to your strategies. And for us, number 2 here, we talk about this in the context of OKRs. So objectives, key results. So here we describe it as objective, strategy, tactics. This is a planning document. This is a way to be able to say, what is our key objective? What are we working towards here? What are the strategies that we're going to use? And then what do those tactics look like? How will we implement this? And for us, this is a means to really, again, get everybody on the same page, to be able to look through, to see the details, to be able to explain the process by which we're going to use to get through the implementation. So the next piece, getting your data. And I will mention that these examples are ways to get your data. There's lots of ways to get your data. We customize this for our clients, customize this for yourself. But think about it in the context of, all right, let's establish our foundational events. We want to make sure that we've got those. We also want to think about our individual and roll-up properties. For you 360 customers, this is a big deal. Depending on how you establish and set up your properties, it will have cost implications for you. So thinking that through, making sure that you clearly spell it out, how you're going to do your roll-up properties is a key component here of measurement strategy. And then things like perhaps cross-device or cross-domain tracking is important to you. Think about how you're going to do that. Please only do this if if this is something that you're allowed to do by your industry. But these are considerations that you might make when thinking about how do we go about getting our data. Okay, so these next couple slides here, I did mention my fun fact that I'm a seaweed farmer, so the images here are from that. But I thought it was a good way to show an analogy of what it takes to do this measurement strategy. And the first piece is to really estimate the lift. This is not like any other Google update from years past. It's not simply an interface change. It's not a new feature or new function. Fundamentally, this is different, and it is going to require a substantial amount of lift. So you need to estimate the time it's going to take for you to do that, the resources required, all sorts of other things that come into play here. It's not simply just flipping the switch and here we go. So you need to really think about how we're going to estimate that lift. The next thing that we're talking about specifically here is having a plan. It's critical to that you have a plan before you start any implementation. This is just a sketch of kind of my plan for my kelp farm, but thinking about it, I wrote a blog post about the auto migrations for GA4, and the analogy that I used is Google essentially offered to pack people up and move for them. The problem with that is if you don't know what you're packing, or if you just pack house and you're moving to a new location, you're probably going to bring a lot of unwanted junk with you that you don't need anymore. So really thinking about it and having that plan, how do we need to bring this over? What are we going to do? Things like making the most of limited custom dimensions by reusing event parameter names, reducing noise and tech debt by removing events that were never used in analyses, and really making data more accessible. These are all things that should go into your plan. Additionally, identifying and committing your resources. So again, this is me out on the kelp boat with my best deckhand that I have here, never talks back to me. The fact of the matter is that when you do your GA4 migration, it's going to take more than one person. Likely it will. The skills that we've identified, a technical analytics person, somebody that knows the tech side of analytics will be essential for this migration. You'll also likely need a developer to help you with that, and a QA team. We highly recommend that the person who does the implementation should not be the person that does the QA. Have separate people to look at them, to check the work, to make sure that things are working. You also likely need report builders, and then you'll need somebody to train as well. So think of this as the analytics specialist or the tech person is going to implement tags. If you're using GTM, they'll do it this way. Developers probably needed to update any data layer snippets. QA, as I mentioned, by somebody else. But think about the resources you have. For me, when I'm out on my seaweed farm, sometimes I bring my children with me and I have them out there, but I know what they're capable of. I know what they can do, and I set realistic expectations for how they're going to work and the things that I ask them to do. So the next thing, for God's sakes, update the default settings. This is crucial and something that can often be overlooked. But the biggest, one of the biggest traps here is the data retention setting. Without updating this, your user level data, including conversions, will be deleted after 2 months. You can extend this and make sure you retain this data, but don't just say like, oh, I'm just going to go over and migrate and not touch anything. Update those default settings. Those are things that you do need to look at. A lot of people smarter than me are going to talk about how to do these things as well, but these are some tips that I'll get to here. So let's quickly review this section. Measurement strategy must-dos. Estimate that lift. Make sure that you know how much time, the resources it's going to take. Have a plan. Come up with that plan, document it, use it as a means to check in with your stakeholders to make sure you're getting the data that they need and helping to answer their business questions. Identifying and committing your resources. Again, think about who you've got in your team, who's going to do that implementation, who's going to do your QA. Is it the same person that's going to set up those reports? Many different ways to be able to think about this, but this is something that we definitely recommend. And then again, update those default settings. Don't lose data just because you were lazy and didn't look at the settings. Okay, next session. Let's talk about some of the migration steps and helpful community resources. Just a comment on community. One of the things that I've found in my going on 20 years in the analytics industry is that we have an amazing community. Even for Measure Minds to do something like offering this free GA4 forward day for you, this is a huge resource where you can get information for free and listen to others that are willing to help you get the best migration and the best setup that you can have. Our community is amazing. If you approach anybody, they're likely to give you helpful tips and talk to you about what it means to be in analytics, share tips and tricks that they've done with their implementations. Leverage this community. It's one of the best things that we have. That said, there are a lot of people in our community and everyone is offering to help you migrate as well. Seer is no different. If you were to jump to our landing page on migrations, you'll see that we're willing to help you migrate too. Here's a link if you choose to go there, or snap the QR code if you want to get a look. But essentially, our team in digital measurement solutions that I manage, all of us, 20 individuals, are all GA4 certified, and we're ready to help. This is what we're actively working on for all of our clients, thinking about how do we help them move from universal analytics to the new GA4. And with that said, everyone takes a slightly different approach. One of the things that I did was look at all the agencies, all the different companies that are offering these services, some of them as low as $59.95. You can find low-cost migration help. Not that I recommend that, but it's out there. There are lots of ways to do it. The way that we talk about GA4 migrations is really kind of starting with that measurement strategy that I just described. It's your plan. It's going to be customized for your business, and it really helps you to get that alignment with the stakeholders. The next thing that we talk about with our migration approach is setting up your key integrations. So whether it's BigQuery, 7 standard queries, Search Console, or Google Ads, making sure that you've got those connections and those integrations to your platform, your new GA4 platform, is going to be very important. Onboarding and team training, I've got a section on this that we'll talk more about, but how do you teach people? How do we use this? What do you mean sessions are active users? What do you mean page views are now events? Don't sweat it. We can help you get up to speed on this, but these are things that you'll have to explain and teach to your stakeholders across your business. And then documentation. Can't say enough about this. It becomes increasingly important. You're going to have new events. You're going to have things that you think about. Documentation becomes very important, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go forward here. So I couldn't resist this. I know that we've got some great resources that are going to talk after me about what not to do with your GA4 migration, but I got 3 things for you. I've already talked about the auto migration. Simply put, don't do it. You don't want to get there. You don't want to allow Google to move for you. You want to be able to do this yourself. The next thing I'll talk about is what not to do is a lift and shift. You probably have broken tags in Universal Analytics and just don't carry over what you have to new GA4. You got to take a look, make sure that you're bringing the right things over, and make sure you're doing that effectively. And then duplicate events. Don't duplicate events. Basically, this should mean that you're not reusing the category action label schema and that you're using the new event schema. This is increasingly, it's just so important to do. It's the fundamental difference of what's happening with GA4, so make sure you don't do that. Again, as I said, there's a lot of people that are smarter than me that are going to tell you all the reasons. These are just 3. But when you're thinking about those 7 steps, or the steps to migrate, we've narrowed this down to 7 steps. The community resources are out there. There's playbooks on this. There's lots of documentation. Everybody's got a different way that they're going to help you migrate. I tried to break it down and keep it very simple and just give you these 7 steps. So starting out with developing that GA4 measurement strategy, use this as your opportunity to align stakeholders, to talk with them, to document what are we doing and why. The next thing is creating new GA4 account properties. We've already talked at length about why not to auto-migrate, but do that, if you use the migration assistant, you will likely have a lot of clutter, a lot of information in there that you don't need. Consider that as you go. The third step, establishing your measurement implementation plan. So we call this an MIP, but this is where you think about what are our conversions, events, metrics, and dimensions, and how do we establish all of those things? So this is really where you get into the nitty-gritty of setting up the details. Setting up key integrations, we talked about this a little bit. Search Console, Google Ads, audiences. These are things that you'll likely need to bring in to your new GA4 setup as well. And then 5th, documentation. So here again, documenting, updating, verifying that measurement implementation plan is going to be critical. Things will likely change from your strategy, and when you get into the depths of implementation, there'll be tweaks and things that you need to make. So go ahead and make sure you do that, and then make sure you do document it as well. Number 6 here, onboarding and training for your team members. I'll talk more about this in a minute, but this is critical. You do need to think about how we're going to train and teach people to go through and to make sure that they're migrating their events. And then finally, I don't detail this, but exporting your universal analytics historic data to make sure that you have that and can look at it. There's a lot of different ways that you can get through and be able to do this. So putting it here to make sure that you're doing so in your migrations. So I talked about community before. We do have an amazing community, and there are so many free and awesome community resources that I encourage you to dig in and to utilize them. I've got just some images here of some of the most popular ones. Of course, there's the Google Analytics Help Community. I give this a meh, it's good. There's lots of information. You can definitely go here as a first check, great source. But really, if you're not part of the Measure Slack community, I encourage you, sign up, get in there. There are 17,415 of your friends in here that are likely to answer your questions and to give you help on migrating to the new GA4. Leverage this as a resource. People are there every day answering questions, providing incredible information about what it means to use Google Analytics and to do your migrations. Don't miss this as a resource. And then here again, I just got some other people that are very prolific in our industry and give lots of information for free. Simo talks about community, talks about information, and really wants to help people. Julius, who's speaking later in this GA4 event, has got some of the most amazing information out there on YouTube, and it's all available for free. So take advantage of that. People like Krista Seiden with her trainings and building things like a migration dashboard are very helpful. And even Anil Batra is doing trainings for Digital Analytics Association and others to help you understand what you need to do. Don't overlook these resources. You are not in it alone. There's so much out there. All it takes is a few clicks to be able to get to some of these things. Okay, let's get into migrating your Google Ads to your GA4 properties. This is relatively simple, and I'm going to show you how to do this here. Again, lots of tutorials on this out there, but let's talk about kind of quickly the how. Starting with your GA4 account property, what you want to do is basically start by clicking on the admin link in this the gear icon in the bottom left corner. What this will do is open up the admin section, which allows you to scroll down and find this Google Ads link. It'll probably be somewhere in the middle of your page. Once you click on that link, it opens up this page here, and you have to have edit access to this, to the admin section to be able to do this. But if you do, this blue link in the corner will be highlighted, and that's the one that you have to click. Once you do that, in step 2. And again, to be able to see the Google Ads accounts, and I grayed them out here to protect the innocent, but you have to have edit permission here as well. Each Google property, all of your related ads properties will be linked here. Simply click the one that you want to activate and hit that confirm button up in the top right corner. Once that happens, you'll get to the next step, which is where you need to make some decisions. The first is whether or not you want to enable personalized advertising. I leave this one checked, depending on the clients that I have, or depending on which account that I'm setting up. Obviously, if you don't want to do this, you toggle this over and unclick it. But the next one here is this auto tagging, or and allowing access to features from within Google Ads. This auto tagging one has got a drop-down menu that you need to get to. So you open that up and you'll have 2 options here. We recommend that you choose the enable auto tagging. This is the one that's recommended, but this actually enables a lot of what you need, the information that you need from Google Ads, to be ported over to your GA4 instance, property instance. So leave this one click that next button. All of this should take you about 3 minutes or less. Once you do that, you'll get to a screen that says accounts are linked. It'll show you that they're linked, and then you're done. You're done with the account setup. So what you need to do next is really kind of get into checking out the reporting and looking at your data. There's a number of different reporting capabilities that are built in here. You can use standard GA4 reports. You can view data in Explore. You can also view data in Google Data Studio. But let me talk about just a couple of these. When it comes to Explore, and clearly in the interface, you're just clicking over here. When you select your metrics, I just did a simple search for Google Ads and came up with the different metrics that I could, had the opportunity to use. This will give you kind of the information that you want, the basic information. And again, things like impressions, ad clicks, ad costs, ad cost per click will be there. But you can also do things like add in conversion events to this exploration reporting. So this is great, gives you lots of good information. You want to check that you've got data in here. This may or may not take up to 48 hours once you link your accounts, but you should at some point see your data in there. The next one I'll talk about is the standard reporting. And here I just made a little video. I use the GA4 Google Merchandise account here, but effectively when you go to acquisition and overview, there will be a card in the middle of this page down towards the bottom that shows you where your Google Ads data is. If you view this card or open this card up, this is where you get your information. You can see the different parameters for your ads accounts. And then you can also do things like see the users, the sessions, engaged sessions, ad costs, cost per click, conversion events. All of this information is also available in these standard reports. Like I mentioned, I'm not going to get into the Google BigQuery, but there's lots of ways to access this data. As you do this, we want to make sure that you're getting in there and make sure that that data is active. And if it's not, then you can get in and troubleshoot. Okay, so linking ads to Google GA4, let's review. Follow the 3 steps that I just outlined to link your accounts. View data and Explore to make sure it's there. View data in your standard reports. And then the thing I didn't talk about here is importing your conversions and audiences. If you're a large advertiser and have lots and lots of conversions and many different audiences, this can be a big task. We help a number of our clients to do this. We've got a number of different ways we can actually make these migrations easier for you. Please reach out and call us if this is something you're interested in, or if you're a big advertiser. This can be an arduous task if you go through and click them one by one. We've got some ways of doing it that can help you to be able to do this efficiently and to make sure that all of your audiences and conversions are ported over correctly. Let's talk about teaching your teammates GA4. So again, I want to start here by saying training is plentiful. This is just a quick look at what's out there on a search for GA4 training. Lots and lots of information, many resources out there, many of them free. I encourage you to take advantage of those things. The fact of the matter is that new GA4 requires you to rethink analytics. The data model behind GA4 is completely different than universal analytics and requires you to do this. Instead of the session-based model like universal analytics, GA4 is based on events and parameters. Everything in GA4 is an event, even a page view is an event. So you need to rethink this. many people who've used GA4 previously, or excuse me, Universal Analytics previously, will have to relearn it and re-understand. So this is part of the process of kind of training your teammates. So a couple of things I'll just walk through quickly here. The biggest difference is account structures. Views are no longer available in GA4. You are going to need to overhaul your default reports because the UI structure is different. There's different ways of looking at these. They're ROI-centric versus user-centric. More emphasis on opening up the chalkboard and letting you create custom reports. So rather than spoon-feeding you, exploration has a lot of different functions and capabilities that you can take advantage of. I talked already about the event-based model, so making sure that that's known, and then sampling. All default reports available in GA4 are always unsampled, even when you apply comparisons and custom parameters to your report, which is a great thing. It's great to see that. Reports training overview. And again, these are just some things to think about, but what do you get out of the box? What are some of the reports there? How do you customize these things and make sure that you can edit them from your existing reports? How to build custom reports from scratch, and then using the libraries, managing reports and collections, being able to do that. These are all some of the things that you may want to touch on in your trainings. Additionally, one of the neat things about GA4 is the attribution modeling. So Universal Analytics had this as well. They had different versions: last click, first click, time decay, and position-based attribution models. They also had a data-driven attribution model, which is fantastic. These are all things that we encourage you to use. Comparing models becomes a very valuable exercise if you're trying to understand how you're spending your ad dollars. One of the things that the new GA4 also has is an ads preferred last click model, which is very interesting to look at. And then attribution models can be changed and data will reprocess. This is a huge factor, which is great. And this actually carries through and across reports. So if you change the model and want to look at it a different way, you can go back to your data and see it. A neat function that they offer. And I know that attribution is important to so many. So this is one of the features that you might want to take a look at. The other big change here, lifecycle reports. So here, Google uses the funnel metaphor of acquire, engage, monetize, retain. This is the way that the reports are set up, as many of you know, but it's a good way to think about things. It's very logical. It helps people to understand, but teach them this. Make sure that they know kind of what's in each of these different parameters. And then providing hands-on training to reinforce concepts. So this is a big deal. When we do our trainings, not only do we teach people, we make them participate as well. So we go through and we say like, okay, let's go to the library and create a new report. We walk them through, we show them how to do this, and then we allow them to add metrics and dimensions to be able to get through, and then show them the report. Hey, what we found is that when users create their own data versus you just saying like, here's your new report, here's all the data you need, when they create their own reports, they're more likely to use them. They understand where the data comes from. They've got a vested interest in seeing those metrics change and using it to understand their business. So very much use this to reinforce your process, make them go through and do it themselves rather than spoon feeding them and doing everything for them. When I talk about this, I often talk about building training curriculum. The planning, this is there's a planning process that goes into this, really kind of understanding your audiences. You may have stakeholders that are logging into Google Analytics for the first time. Beginner audiences need different training than advanced audiences. Or maybe your leadership team, your executive team wants to use the new GA4 to understand how the business is performing, how your ad buys are performing. Think about building your training for specific audiences. The next step here is choosing your learning platforms. So here again, getting into the learning platforms, you can use Lessonly, you can use Canva. There's so many different ways that you can do learning platforms. Choose one and make sure that you stick with it. And then the reinforcement methods. Thinking about how do you reinforce the learning? How do you do those sort of trainings? How do you make sure that people are getting through? And then fourth is incentivizing that learning. We often do, when we're doing trainings, we talk about who's accomplished the training, what the deadlines are. Sometimes we use it as a motivating factor to say who hasn't done the training yet. So think about this as a way to be able to incentivize this. You want people to learn these things, so how will you incentivize them? And then we encourage a module-based approach. So don't just try to dump everything onto your teammates. Come up with modules. So break it apart into smaller things. These are just examples. You can do an intro, you can talk about the interface, you can talk about building reports, you talk about explorations, segmentation, sampling and thresholds, conversion events and event modifications, e-commerce reporting, debug, admin. There's lots of things. You can talk about marketing and attribution, you can talk about content analysis, you can even get into GTM tagging and testing. So many different things, but we do encourage you to break it down and to modularize these things. All right, let's review. So teaching GA4 to your teammates, encourage you to plan your curriculum, know your audiences, know who you're speaking to, use a module-based approach, and then utilize those community resources. So many of them out there. Encourage you to take advantage of that. So in closing, procrastinators beware, the clock is ticking, but there is still time. So I do encourage you to act now, because that timeline is ticking. You still have time to migrate, but you do need some time to plan for these things. So with that, here's the link to get to Seer's migration services. I encourage you to take a snap of that QR code as well if you want to take a look. Thanks everyone. Again, I'm John Lovett, and hopefully we can get a couple questions here.
Thanks for that, John. There's two questions I can see. I think only one in the Q&A section. Isa has asked, can you tell us more about duplicate events?
Right. So duplicate events. Part of what we want to think about here is don't just port all of your events over. Some of the things some of the cautions that can happen here is, if you're just thinking about like, how do I just move all these things over? It's likely to occur in a way that you're duplicating things. You don't want this to happen. So, part of the guidance that we offer is setting up those new GA4 account properties rather than just doing the auto migrations, because that's where we've seen some duplication of events. That's one of the ways that we talk about there. So that's the quick short answer on that one.
Cool. And there's another question in chat, which is from Laura. So she's asked, should you install GA4 via GTM as UA or in a new container? I'm assuming she means, should you use GTag or GTM?
Right. If I understand that question correctly, you can reuse containers, but highly recommend that you probably establish a new one or set one up. This is more of a developer question. Looking at there's people more qualified than I to talk about how to use tag management solutions, but there's so many variables here depending on how you're setting up, what your implementation looks like, what other connections you're using, and how many other tags you're deploying as well. So not to back out, but it depends on that one.
Yeah, I would say for us, we always use it would be upgrading the existing container and keeping the existing triggers, but just migrating the GA3 events over to GA4, and then obviously in July deleting the GA3 events because they're not going to do anything. There's another question that's come in from Brooke. When looking at attribution models, can you easily manipulate the look back window like you can in GA3?
That is a good question. I believe that is the case. I have not dove in deeply to tell that. I'm not sure, Phil, if you have.
Yeah, I would have thought. I know in GA3 in like multi-channel funnels, you could change it. I think it was maximum of, I don't think it was 30 or 90 days. I think in the attribution settings where you've got data-driven or blast get wins or ad preferred, I think there might be a setting in there for durations. So I'd probably have to look at that setting to see what it's set to. Normally those settings, though, they do run historically. So when you shift from like data-driven to last click or whatever, it kind of reprocesses that historic data. So I would have thought if there's a change to look back window, it should adjust the reports to account for that. But I've not tried it myself. Time a bit now because we're 2 minutes over. But we've put a link to the networking lounge, which is so it's bit.ly/GA4-Wonder. So if people want to sort of carry on the chat with you within like the Wonder sort of lounge, be my guest, and we'll email you a copy of the questions and chat sort of after this. So thank you so much again for your talk, and lots of useful tips and tricks in there.